Hello everyone. Um, so today I've been asked to talk to you about a project that we are still working on. It looks like this at this moment in time. It's called Garden for the Future, and it's in Sheffield Park and Garden. For those of you that are not aware of Sheffield Park and Garden, because although I am northern, it is not in Sheffield. It's in East Sussex. This is Sheffield Park and Garden. It is a Grade 1 listed garden. It's got influences of Capability Brown and Repton, like most of our amazing landscapes that we have. And it sits within an outstanding area of natural beauty and also next to a lot of other listed landscapes. So it really is a place of beauty and wonder and joy. We are, as a property for the National Trust, we are the busiest in London and South East. So we have a mixture of a lot of humans coming to visit us, but also this really beautiful curated listed landscape. So I've worked for the National Trust for 3 years, prior to that local government in parks. And one of the first questions that I asked myself when I got to Sheffield Park and Garden was around the fact that it's a really, really old landscape. There's a lot of really ancient tree stock. So as part of the National Trust, as an organisation, we've got most ancient trees within our area also. But as part of that, the landscape is dying. Partly because it's old, but partly because we are in an extreme climate. This is just a bit of a flyover with a drone, so you can kind of get a sense of what it looks like as a whole. But the extremities of the extreme weather that we're seeing now in this really, really ancient landscape, you can really see the strain in the landscape. And for us as an organisation where we are behind a pay barrier, unlike a lot of yourselves, this is my business. The way the National Trust is set up financially is when people come and visit us, that money comes back to me as the property manager, as the general manager, and then as part of the budget profiling, I can choose where that money goes. So as a business model, if I've got a dying landscape that is not looking so fab, it's not really the best business model to be sitting in either, is it really? So although it pained me immensely, because actually spreadsheets and finance don't really ring my bell, if I'm being totally honest, and I'm not really that fab at it. However, it is the language of our world most of the time. So this is what extreme climate has looked like at Sheffield Park and Garden. And it is brutal. So the tree on the right hand side, I really hate to say it, was struck by lightning about 2 weeks before I started. So if I'm being totally honest, really relieved that happened just before I started, because everybody else then needed to deal with it rather than me. So I just followed it on socials and just saw how well the team did at dealing with it before I came in and knew what I was stepping into. But this tree is part of people's culture. This is a tree that people traditionally come to. It's part of people's historical family photographs. People were devastated, really, really devastated. The garden team equally were, I don't think saddened quite kind of covers it really, because this is an amazing tree that the garden team have nurtured and cared for many years. And the scale of that devastation that you see in the landscape is deeply concerning and deeply worrying, and it hurts. We all work in this industry, and in our landscapes we all love and care and nurture for them, so it hurts. And then you can see the oak tree on the other side of the screen just tipped over, just fell. And then when we looked at the roots, they were blue because they're sat in water, so they've just rotten, so it's just fell. The tree looked fine, but it's just fell over, and that is also the reality of kind of like what we're seeing around the garden. This is now not uncommon for us to see this types of behaviour across the landscape. The other aspect that I wanted to talk about was connected to that is the first question that I had then connected to that is you really do need to understand, a little bit like what John was saying at the start, is your place and your space. So what does that mean in relation to what are we going to do about this? You know, we're seeing all of this kind of extreme impact on our Grade 1 listed garden, but what does that actually mean? And for the intervention of Garden for the Future, that is the same place. So the picture at the bottom was what it looked like before. The picture at the top is what it now looks like. And this space in the garden was selected very carefully because it's kind of away from the main curatorial landscape where we've got the main Brown and Repton areas of design. But this is the first major intervention that the National Trust has made within this garden. We've owned it for 70 years. It's the first massive intervention that we've made. And part of the reason why we've made that connected to the garden is back to that statement that I made right at the start, is the garden is dying. So this space originally was where Arthur Soames, who was also one of the curators of space, he used to experiment. Gardens have always been places of experimentation after all, haven't they? And he used to experiment with what plants he wanted to try and cultivate and breed or use around the garden. And then that's kind of got lost over time. So the whole point of Garden for the Future is that we are experimenting. So we are really leaning into the fact that we have a changing climate in a curatorial Grade 1 listed garden. How do we keep and maintain those vistas, those colours that you saw on that video to start, the contrast, the designs of that space? How do we preserve the historical landscape with stock that we potentially know are not going to survive in the future? So like the giant redwood that you saw that had exploded, there are 2 other giant redwoods prior to that one that also met a similar fate. So there's obviously something not quite right in the system. So I started to be quite curious around asking these types of questions when I started there, around what is it that we're going to do with this as a landscape ultimately? What interventions do we make? What tree stock is going to survive in the future? So we're a woodland garden, so the majority of our landscape is trees, because actually we don't know the answers to those questions. And that, if I'm being really honest, feels quite adulty, doesn't it, of like actually what you do about that. And also there is also for me a real scale of responsibility that sits with that. All of us in this room have that responsibility, as touched on by the previous speakers connected to that. We are the influencers, we are the changers, we are the designers, we are the implementers of change in landscape. So where we went with that is collaboration. I am not a scientist. I will never profess to be a scientist. So we started with Kew Gardens. We are really lucky to have been able to work with them in relation to research that Kevin Martin is doing. So he is their head of trees, and his journey has been the same. Is he noticed anomalies in the landscape? He noticed tree stock that wasn't surviving. He noticed things that just made no sense, that just didn't stack up. So again, that curiosity of what is happening here in this landscape, I don't understand what's going on. So the research that Kevin's doing is really at the forefront of the science around climate mapping. So it brings, Kew are really lucky that they've got a weather station in there, so they've got really accurate data. We're not quite so lucky because our weather station is down the road. But what Kevin has been able to do is really start to look at what species are going to survive at Kew in their future climate. I'm really pleased to say that it's not quite as devastating for us as it is for Kew. If you look at the data that is readily available from Kew, their landscape in a future climate is devastating. But if you look at this map here as an example of some of the data that we get, all of those red blobs, none of those will feature in our park and garden going forward. None of those will survive in a future climate in Sheffield Park and Garden. So actually, when you're presented with that data, what are you going to do about that? Because as it stands at this moment in time, we actually don't have an answer for it. But you have to ask the question. There's no point in you avoiding whatever it is that you're seeing in front of your eyes as time is going by. That's quite a lot of stock. And actually, when you then start to go into place and have a look at what that looks like, imagine those places where actually none of that has any of those features there anymore. And what is that going to mean? What does that look like? What is that doing? So a lot of the grade 1 listing for our garden is about autumn colour, but connected to that is the reflections that you get in the lake, so you get that beautiful mirroring. So if that mirroring's gone, like what does that then mean in relation to a curatorial design landscape? So I think, if I'm being really honest, throughout this process, a lot of it has been and then what. So we learn and then what. But all of us as a team on property have been going through, we learn and then what. This is the data, though, that actually probably tipped me over the edge and actually kept me quiet for about half an hour in my office, which is probably quite rare, and the staff probably valued it for a short period of time until I then came out afterwards. These black blobs, we don't know the answer to the question. So we do have a lot of cultivars in our garden, and there isn't enough data. So it might be that they're that rare. It might be that we just haven't got the data, the research isn't there around whether they're going to survive or not. So when you add the red blobs and the black blobs, look at the scale of what that means for our garden in relation to, I don't know the answer to the black blobs. The red blobs we know are not going to be there. So what does that then look like in relation to what plant stock are we then left with? Really interesting question. Quite daunting as a question when you really start to work out how you're going to work through that and what your actions and decisions need to be out of the back of it. So we then also buddied up with Bristol University because we realised that actually, because our weather station is not in our garden and it's down the road in the village, that we needed to get some more data. So I bought these yellow boxes. I didn't really know what they were. The lecturer told me that the researcher that I needed to do that. So I had a little bit of money left at the end of the year because we're in the same situation that you are, where there is very little funds around. So I just bought these 10 things and left them under my chair for a period of time while we were working out what it was that we needed to do with them and where we've put them. So going back to understanding place, where do we then place these 10 little tiny tags that we've bought? These are monitoring microclimates across the garden. So how is that going to be helpful in relation to where the red blobs are, where the black blobs are? What is it in relation to the data that we need that's going to help us kind of narrow down and really fine-tune the data that we've already got in relation to what plants are going to survive in our garden in the future climate that we're predicting. And we've also got moisture sensors and rain sensors as well that really help us try and just define and understand the data even more. Some of it you get hunches and you kind of know. Some of it you kind of like, oh, actually, we didn't really know that at all. And that is also really interesting because you think you know place. Do you? Do you really know your place? We realise that we know some of it, we don't know all of it. And this is the type of data that we then started to get from the teeny tags. So this is one teeny tag from around the garden between May and November. But obviously we've got 10 of those. And the contrast of data, I didn't actually realise I'm a data geek. I am a data geek. The contrast of data from around the garden, again, fascinating. Lay that onto your black blobs, lay that onto your red blobs, even more fascinating in relation to what is that telling us about our garden, what is that telling us about what species we really need to be looking for in relation to what we need to plant for a future climate. Royal Holloway have also been working with us in relation to AI. And this is a drone, and this is recording photosynthesis. So from a really boring side, from me as the general manager, we are world famous for our autumn colour. So the whole world visits us, it feels like the whole world anyway, visits us in autumn. How can we use this where we can start to predict when autumn is going to start that helps us to prepare as a property for the whole world coming to visit us in autumn? So from a business model point of view, really, really sensible in relation to when is our super peak going to be? When do we need to be ready for that? But also, what is that telling us about which trees are doing well, which trees are not doing well, which are struggling? Does that correlate with the red blobs? Does it correlate with the black blobs? Does it correlate with the data that the tiny tags is also telling us? I think one of the joys of the aspects around this is that all of the people that are working on this with us all want to share. And with Garden for the Future, what Garden for the Future has enabled us to do is narrate this as Ian was saying before, is it's a difficult conversation. It does bring anxiety, it does bring complexity, but Garden for the Future has enabled us to narrate it in a way that is in a place of beauty. It adds hope. It also adds curiosity from people. And these are the two people that we've worked with in relation to that journey with Garden for the Future. So Joe Perkins on the left is a landscape architect. He's a 3 times gold winner at Chelsea. Really, really nice dude. Jake on the right, he is from Landscapes Consultants, and he is the guy that constructed it for us. We have learned so much from both of these people, both experts in their own field. Jake on the right, we've changed our entire machinery that we've got within our garden because he knows he's in that industry. So he is enabling us to have a lighter footprint. As he put it politely, is, do you know what, Pippa, this machine weighs less than you that it walks up when it goes over the garden. Wasn't quite too sure whether that was quite a compliment or not, but I took it in what he was trying to say to me nicely, is that actually you probably need to change your machinery. But again, fascinating in relation to all of these people as experts in their own right, in their own fields, and what we've learned from them and what we continue to learn from them in that relationship together, connected to how do we protect a curatorial design landscape for future generations? How do we make interventions that are appropriate? What species are we using? We're not planting for now, we're planting for 50, 150, 200 years in the future. What species is that we need to use? And how do we do that in collaboration with many other people? Joe's a lecturer, he's the next landscape architects that are coming through. So Joe is sharing what we're learning from the science of this with up and coming students and the next landscape architects. I am never going to know anything to the scale that Jake is in relation to the types of machinery that we should be using, that not only means that it's not as heavy as me as it goes through the garden, but also that it makes us more efficient. So how can our productivity for all of us, we're all in the same position where actually, you know, resource is scarce, isn't it? You know, we need to deploy that really savvily. So how do we do that? And Jake has been fundamental in part of that journey around us being efficient, and then we can use our resources more sustainably as we move forward, really. And then there are also other people that we've worked with. So we're also working with Bartlett's around worms and mulch and ancient trees, because we've got so many. So how do we nurture ancient trees into like really longevity as much as we possibly can do? It's been a fascinating journey in relation to what we learn from the science, what it's helping us do in relation to informed decisions of interventions that we need to make going forward, but also how we can share that, how we can spread that, how we can bring that together to really enable us to make really, really meaningful impacts in our landscapes for now and for future generations.